Okay, I'm here at the Dene Nation Arctic Youth Climate Leadership Summit talking about climate justice. And here I am with one of the primary facilitators and one of the primary coordinators, Daniel Tassili of Dene Nation, and Cam Fenton, Executive Director of the Canadian Youth Climate Coalition. And so I just wanted to ask a couple questions. First, we'll hear from, both of you can answer the questions how you want, but essentially I wanted to know, what are your thoughts after spending 3 days with these youth from all across the Arctic and really all across from Canada in terms of this ensuing battle to stop the Mackenzie Valley gas project? You know, are you inspired? Are you hopeful? You know, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I am hopeful. I'm hopeful because there's a lot of passionate young people here who are very eager to learn about these issues and to work on these issues. But there's also a lot of confusion and a lot of hard issues to deal with that project, and I think that's come out in a lot of the discussions we've had from youth from the northern communities. Is that some of them are strongly against the pipeline, others are not necessarily against the pipeline, but are concerned about a lot of the impacts to the land. But I think everyone here understands that there is division in the communities between people who want to see this development go forward and between people who really want to stop this development. And so I think that's one of the key issues that's come out here, and I'm happy to see, though, that the young people here acknowledge that, and that they realize that they need to go back to their communities and work on this, on consulting with people on both sides of this issue, and really talking about this issue in their communities so that they can come to some kind of consensus about how the community together will proceed in dealing with this project.
And given the decision by the Obama administration to delay the Keystone XL, what many feel will be a project killer for TransCanada's ambitions, what do you think about that moment that just happened, and how that'll impact the discourse on MGP here in the Northwest Territories, given that there was a similar victory 30 years ago led by the elders and led by the youth? Is that going to invigorate more dialogue? Is that going to empower more people to get involved in the fight, or will it have no effect? What are your thoughts on that, guys?
Right on. No Keystone XL. That's a good thing. I think one interesting aspect of this is that if the more pipelines we can stop going out of the tar sands, the more we can prevent them from expanding the tar sands. And the less they expand the tar sands, the less their demand for natural gas in Canada will grow. And we all know that the Mackenzie gas project is essentially going to feed the tar sands expansion. But that being said, so I think by stopping these pipelines out of the tar sands, there's less of a chance that they'll need to build the Mackenzie gas project to supply the tar sands with gas. That being said, we have to be really careful that if the Mackenzie gas project doesn't go through, that they don't just supplement this need for natural gas with hydraulic fracturing, which is already happening all over. It's happening in northern BC, near Fort Liard, Fort Nelson, right up to the NWT border, and they're starting to expand that into Dene. And we need to be really careful about that, and we need a moratorium on the hydraulic fracturing.
So you're both on the road to Durban. I have a question for Cam Fenton. And Daniel, you can chime in on this after Cam. But the Canadian Youth Climate Coalition is bringing a delegation down to Durban. The focus of CYCC has been really rooted in a strong climate justice framework. It's been really inspiring to see, especially the camps that happen across the country this summer. What are your thoughts on the fossil fuel regimes, attempts to just access extreme forms of energy everywhere? We're talking tar sands, fracking, Arctic drilling, offshore. What are your guys' thoughts going into Durban, and in particular, what are your thoughts, on how you're going to deal with our crazy government?
Going into Durban, the CYCC and the youth delegations we've decided we're going to actually take on sort of the frame of taking on the Canadian government from the point that that internationally, as we've seen through things like the Canadian government actively lobbying on behalf of the Keystone, the Canadian government in Europe trying to kill the EU's fuel quality directive, we've seen that basically our government has devolved internationally into little more than the public relations wing of the fossil fuel industry, especially things like the tar sands and what we're seeing with the expansion of things like fracking and other unconventional resources. So what we're doing is we're really going to be taking aim at Canada based on that through a project, a mini campaign that we're calling Operation Oil Change. And so through that, we're really going to be taking aim at them and sort of laying bare the connections between Canada, our government, our negotiators, and the fossil fuel corporations and big oil that's destroying lands across the world. And using that, working with other youth from across the world to really focus in on Canada and hit them where it hurts, and really keep building up what has been, we've seen over the last 5 years, this international movement against the tar sands, that's really hitting Canada. We're starting to see the tide turn with the victory against the Keystone, with what's going on in Europe right now, and really building that forward.
Would you add anything to that, Daniel?
I'll speak now as a member of the Canadian Youth Delegation. I don't think our government's insane. They're cold, calculating climate criminals. They're smart and they're good at what they do. And they're not only not doing anything to stop climate change. They're working on behalf of the fossil fuel industry. And but I can see how you think they're crazy, because all of this unconventional fossil fuel production that you mentioned, it's pure madness. I mean, we're past peak production of conventional oil. That's why we're moving into all these crazy new ways of getting fossil fuels. And even ignoring all of the issues of social justice, human rights, the lives that are being lost, the cultures that are being destroyed from climate change and fossil fuel exploitation, just the economics and the idea that we're going to do all these crazy things to get energy is it's insane. And so that's why it's so important to take on these fossil fuel companies and the government directly. Because we do need to move off of fossil fuels, and we need to democratize our energy sources. And I think that's some of the most important work that the Canadian Youth Climate Coalition is doing right now.
Can you guys send a message, given the Keystone XL, given that Durban's coming, given that Europe's passing the fuel quality directive, what's your message to the young people living in the midst of the Athabasca region and the Peace River region, the Cold Lake region where all the tar sands is?
I'd have to say we stand behind you, and there's a lot of people standing behind you, especially up north here. People here, we don't like the tar sands. We hate it. We hate the water pollution. We hate what it's doing to the land, and we hate the carbon emissions and the impact it has on Canadian climate policy. So we stand behind you, and we want to work with you, and we want to support you, and we want to see something done about this.
Yeah, it's just following up on, or expanding on what Dan said, across this country and around the world, there's youth all standing behind you, fighting these projects, we're seeing sort of the choking out of the tar sands, starting to take it to these pipelines and starting to roll it back so that when we can eventually take the fight to the heart, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Two seasoned climate justice activists, human rights activist Cam Fenton, ED of CYCC, Daniel Tassili of Dene Nation, on their way to Durban from the Arctic to Africa. Climate justice.